In many different programming languages, classes are a core concept of the language, but the same really isn't true about JavaScript. Nonetheless, though, JavaScript does have classes, and they are actually still very important, and they can be very helpful in many different cases. So today, we're going to take a look at classes, how they work, and how we can use them. So let's jump right into it and create our very first class. So we can define a class using the class keyword, and we can follow that up by the name of the class. So let's just start off with something simple. We'll say rectangle. And we can follow that up by opening and closing curly braces. So inside of the class, we can create properties and we can create methods. So let's go ahead and start off with a basic property. So the way that we can create a property is by just saying the name. So we're going to create a property called name by just specifying its name, and then we can specify its value. So something like this. So we have the property called name with the value of Kyland. Now to utilize this, we actually need to create a new instance of this class. And the way that that looks is we need to go outside of the class, and we can create a constant called whatever we want. We can name this whatever we want. I'm just going to name this rec. And we're going to set that equal to a new instance of that rectangle class. And we're going to invoke it just like this. So now this rec is going to be a new instance of this rectangle class. Now to utilize that, we can actually use this new instance that we just created. So we could say rec, and then we can say dot whatever property or method we want. So you can see that name is going to autofill here. So let's just go ahead and console.log rec.name. And if we save that, you're going to see that that value gets output to the console here. Now, it doesn't make too much sense to utilize a name property on a rectangle class. So let's just go ahead and get rid of this, and let's create something a little bit more meaningful for a rectangle class. So let's create a height, and we'll set that equal to 5, and let's create a width, and we'll set that equal to 10. Now we can also utilize these out here as well. So remember, we're creating that new instance here from that rectangle class, and we could console.log here rec.width, and we could say rec.height. And if we save that, we're going to get the width and the height. And we could also utilize this, like we can multiply them together to get the area if we wanted. So we could say rec times width, or rec.width times rec.height. And if we save that, we're going to get 50 output, because 10 times 5 is 50, if you didn't know. But in many cases, we don't want to just statically define a width and a height. Maybe we want to pass that in, that value, whatever value it may be, pass that into the rectangle constructor whenever we need to utilize it. So how do we do something like that? Well, we can actually pass those values in to this rectangle constructor up here. So whenever we create this instance class, we have the option to pass in values for that specific instance. So we could say that we want to pass in a 5 and a 10. Now, this isn't just going to work right away. We actually need to create a little bit of something else up here inside of the class. So first thing we need to do is we actually need to create what's called a constructor. So we can use the constructor keyword, and what this is going to do is basically is just going to construct the class, and it's going to take in any type of arguments that we pass in to the constructor method down here. So let's say we want to accept the height and we want to accept the width. Now we can also set the this.height equal to height. Now this is where things get a little bit confusing, because this.height equal to height, what does that even mean? Well, remember, this is just an instance. So every time that we call new rectangle down here, it's going to create a brand new instance, completely separate from all the other instances. So whenever we pass in this values right here, these 2, 5, and 10 values here, we need a way to set those values on this class right here. So the way that we do that is we utilize this dot some value, and we set that equal to the value that was passed in. And this is going to be something that we're going to use a lot. The keyword this is something that is used a lot whenever we're working with classes. So we can also do this dot width is equal to width. Now we can go ahead and create a basic method. So let's just go ahead and create get height. And a base method would be defined just like this. We set the method name followed by parentheses and opening closing curly braces. We don't need any keywords or anything specific like that. We just create the method just like this. So inside of this method, let's just go ahead and console.log this.height. So whenever we define this dot height up here, it's going to be set to the value that we passed in. So it's going to create a new value on this class called height, and it's going to be available via this dot height. So whenever we create this new instance and we pass in 5 and 10, 5 is going to be the height and 10 is going to be the width, and it's going to create those values on that new instance. So let's just go ahead and call rec.getHeight. And if we call that, it's going to log out the height over here inside of the console. Now let's just stop right there for just a second, because if you saw my keyword this video, link is up in the cards if you want to go and check it out, you'll know that we went in depth with the keyword this, and you'll know that the keyword this only works on objects. So why is it working inside of these classes? Well, in short, these are objects that we're creating using this class, and the class itself is just an abstraction over top of the original object. So we can actually see this if we just console.log just rec. Just like this. And if we save that, you're going to see that we get the exact same result of an object. So we have the height and we have the width properties defined on this object, and you can see that right here it is an object with just the rectangle name. Now a little bit of backstory on this. Classes were originally added in the ES6 update. That's the same update back in 2015 that gave us let and const. And these classes were added to JavaScript to make it a little bit easier for developers who are coming from a major class-based language such as Java or C++, to make it a little bit easier for them to develop JavaScript applications utilizing a tactic they've used before. Now, JavaScript classes are built a little bit differently than in those other languages. Classes in JavaScript are basically just syntactical sugar over top of a basic object. So in the end, whenever we run our JavaScript code, classes are going to be converted into an object. So all of the methods, the properties, everything that we define on these classes are going to eventually be converted into an object whenever we run the JavaScript code. It's just syntactical sugar sprinkled over top of the original object. It makes it a little bit easier to write things in a class-based way. But now you have a basic backstory of why we have classes now in JavaScript and why we're able to use the keyword this inside of JavaScript classes. But now let's get back into it and let's actually create a second instance of this rectangle class. And the way that we can do that is the exact same way that we created the first instance. So we could create a constant, and I'm just going to name this rec2, and like I said, you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name this rec2, and we're going to create a new rectangle, and we're going to add a different height and width to this. So let's say this is going to be a 15 height and a 30 width. And now if we save that, and let's actually just go ahead and console.log rec2. Now you can see that we've got two separate objects now. We've got the rectangle, the original one, this one with the height and width of 5 and 10, and then we've got this second instance class, the rectangle2 or the rect2 class that we just created a new instance of with a height of 15 and a width of 30. And this is where you can really see how the constructor works, because whenever we pass in the values here, it's received by the constructor, passing in the height and the width, and then it just creates new properties on each one of these instances with those values that were passed in. So let's now take a look at inheritance. And inheritance is actually used a lot in class-based development. And what it does is it allows you to create a class and take the values from one class and add it to another without disturbing that other class. So let me kind of show you how this works, and it might make a little bit more sense. So I've created this class here called creature, and I've just got this constructor which is accepting 4 parameters or 4 arguments: name, height, fur color, and average age, and I'm just setting those equal inside of this current instance. And I've also got a method called introduce, which is just console.logging, hello, I am, whatever name, and my species generally lives this average age, years old. So now we can actually create a different class. Let's just go ahead and create another class called, let's say, dog. And we could say that this is going to extend creature. Just like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a new class called dog. And it's going to take, this extends keyword is going to say that it's going to take the values from creature. So this creature class is the parent element, and then the dog class that we're creating now is the child element. And everything that the parent element has, all of the methods and properties that this parent element has, is going to be available on the new dog class that we're creating, or anything that we extend from the creature class. So let's just say constructor, and we want to take in everything that this up here takes in if we want to utilize this creature class, and we kind of do. So we want to set height, name, height, fur color, and we want to set average age. And this is just going to allow us to pass those values into the constructor up here. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to use what's called the super method. And this is just going to basically call this up here. It's basically just going to call this constructor method up here for the parent class. So we need to pass in all of those values here, and we can actually accept more values inside of here if we want to utilize those inside of this dog class. So if we wanted to say breed, we can actually utilize this breed inside of this here as well. So these 4 values are for the generic constructor up here for creature, and we're going to call super, which is just going to pass those values into this constructor, and it's going to call this constructor. Now we can actually say this dot breed is equal to breed. And that is going to set everything up for us inside of this new dog class that is extending creature. Now we can actually create a new instance of this dog class. So we can say const dog is equal to new dog. And we can pass in all of those values that we need to pass in. So the name we can say is Joe. The height we could say, let's say, is 54. The fur color we could say is brown. The average age we could say is maybe 15 for a dog, and the breed we could say this is a pit. Now we can utilize all of those values on that new class, and we can use everything on this here, and we can utilize everything on the creature class as well. So if we wanted to say use this introduce method here, we could say dog.introduce, and we could call that, and we're going to get hello, I am Joe, which is the name we passed into dog, and my species generally lives to be about 15 years old, which is the average age value that we passed in, which was then passed up to this constructor, which is now available on the dog class as well. Now, the cool thing about this is we can still utilize this creature class as normal. So if we have something, maybe say an alien, we don't have any information on it, so we could just utilize this creature class instead as a general generic class. So we could say const alien is equal to new creature, and we can still pass in the information here. We could say the name is unknown, the height is maybe 96, the fur color is none maybe, and the average age is maybe, let's say 0, because we don't know how old it is or how the average age is. And then we could utilize the alien instance, and we could say alien.introduce. And if we say alien.introduce, we're still going to get that value printed out of the console. Hello, I'm unknown, and my species generally lives to be about 0 years old. And that's how we can utilize the creature class, even if it is extended by another class. Now back to the dog class for just a second, because we can actually add new methods to this as well. So maybe we could say make sound, and we could just console.log woof woof, the sound that a dog makes, and then we could say dog.makeSound, and that's going to log out woof woof to the console just like we normally would expect, because the dog class is just extending creatures. So all of the properties and methods are going to be available on dog, but we can also add our own to the dog class as well. Now let's talk about getters and setters. And getters and setters are a little strange until you get to see how they work, and then they can kind of make a little bit more sense. So before we do that, I've gone ahead and created the square class, and we are just accepting the width and setting the height and the width equal to the width, because if you didn't know, a square is the same on all 4 sides. So let's go ahead and create a getter. Now, getters and setters are going to be methods that act like properties. So we could say get, and then we could define a method. So let's say we want to get the area. So we could say get area, and we could define this just like a method. And let's just go ahead and return this dot height times this dot width, because the area is the height times the width. Now let's just go ahead and create a new instance of this. So let's say const sqr is equal to new square, and let's pass in the width. Let's say it's going to be 5. Now let's just go ahead and console.log sqr.area, just like this. It just looks like a property though. So if we save that, we are going to get 25 logged out to the console, which is the width times the width, of course, which is 25. Now, this square.area, it is a method up here. We can clearly see that it is a method, but it acts like a property. So whenever we want to get something, we just say the instance dot whatever the get method is, and we don't have to call it, we just have to name it just like a property. And you can even see that it says up here that it is a property. So it is a method that acts like a property. Now let's talk about setters, because setters are a little bit different, but not by much. So we could say set, and then we can also call this area as well. We don't have to worry about name clashing here. So we could say area, and we actually need to accept the area. So we can accept the area as an argument here. So we could say this dot height is equal to math dot square root of the area that was passed in. So the height is going to be derived from the square root of whatever area we passed in. And then we could set the width equal to, well, we could set it equal to this, or we could just say this dot height, because the height is going to be the exact same as the width. So now if we wanted to set this, we could say square dot area, and we just set that equal to whatever area we want. So let's say the area is now 81. So now let's just go ahead and console.log square dot area down here after we set it equal to 81. So we'll see the original area that we passed in, which should be 25 again. Then we'll set the area equal to 81, and then the get method should get the new area, or the new height and width. And that's actually, instead of saying area, let's say height. That way we can see the height that has been changed. So if we save that, we are going to see the 25 that's logged out from right here. Then we set the area to 81. We're logging out the height, which is going to be the square root of the area that we passed in. So it's going to be set equal to the square root of this 81 that was passed in. And this is how we can utilize getters and setters. Like I said, they are methods that are going to act like properties. Now, static properties are going to be properties that are available on the class rather than on the instance. So let's see how this works. So let's say we want to get the angle of the corner, so the angle at which the corner meets. And if you know anything about math, you'll know that a square is 90-degree corners. So it would make sense that we would have this as a static property. So we could say static, and we could say corner angle. We can set that equal to 90. Now, to access this static property, we don't want to grab from square. We actually want to grab from square up here. We want to grab it from the class itself rather than the instance. So let's just say console.log, and we're going to say square dot, and we're going to grab corner angle. And if we save that, now you can see we have 90 logged out to the console. And just to prove a point here, we could say console.log square dot corner angle, and it's not going to be available on that instance. It's going to come back as undefined. So it's going to be accessible via the class only, not the instance here. Now, there's one more concept that I want to take a look at today, and this is polymorphism. Now, polymorphism, this sounds very scary, but it's actually very simple. So the idea of polymorphism is to take a generic method and override it basically to make more of a specific method. So let me show you. So we've got this make sound on this creature method up here. And of course, dog is extending creature again. So if we wanted to make a more specific sound, so we could say make sound, and we could basically just redefine this on the dog class here. And we could redefine this to a more specific sound. So we could say console.log woof woof, and whenever we call dog.makeSound, we are going to get woof woof logged out to the console, even though the parent element makeSound has its own method of the same name. So we can basically redefine the exact same methods to be more specific than the parent element. So if we created a new instance of the creature class, so we could say const alien is equal to new creature, and let's just go ahead and copy this here because it really does not matter. And let's just say alien.makeSound. So if we call alien.makeSound, we're going to get that generic creature sound. But since we called dog.makeSound, and on the dog class, we have specified a more specific method for this by defining it on the dog class, we are going to utilize this method rather than utilizing this method. But we can still, of course, use this if we use an instance of the creature class. So if this dog extends creature and we have the exact same method on both of them, it's going to take the child class's method rather than the parent class's method. And that is about it for JavaScript classes. Now, if you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments section down below. I'll answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.